Deep Dive Film School makes no claim of ownership of the film footage used in this episode. The film footage is owned entirely by the copyright holders. Also, we're going to spoil the hell out of this movie, so this is your warning. Welcome to Deep Dive Film School!
This week we're going to finish out our Taika Waititi Fest with his 2019 film, Jojo Rabbit.
Let's dive on in. All right, everybody, I am Adam Sherlock.
And I'm Adam Poulter.
If you like what you see/hear, please like and subscribe. You can find us in all the places and spaces that people what?
Find good media, Sherlock.
That's damn right. They certainly do.
Right.
Yeah. And just as an addendum, we're not a real school. Some reason that's come up in the comments a couple of times. We do crack beers at the beginning, so I think it's pretty obvious this is not a real school.
Wait, what?
I know. This is the first you're hearing about this. You can't audit this for maybe some of your credit hours. I am sad to say. But if you are here for our Taika Waititi Festival,
yes.
You have reached the climax of that. You want to talk about this last film? And I will say this. Every single time, every movie we did, and I was like, this is so great. And you were like, wait till Jojo Rabbit. And I have, and now we've watched it. So tell me about the first time you saw this. Tell me about your impressions.
Oh my God! Well, this film was really, to me, I think his best film. I love all of his other films; they're all equally wonderful and I think important. And I honestly think, to me, he could be someone as important. And we could look back at Waititi in 20 years and think of him like we do along the lines of Spielberg or something. Not because he does big great action, but he has these wholesome movies that kind of reel you in and you'll start to build nostalgia for. And, he's at his probably most Wes Anderson here.
Agreed. Yes. Wes Anderson, I thought a lot about.
Outside of, the myriad of other things that he's done. If you look at what he's done, they're all different, right? Yeah. Which I love.
Horror mockumentary, a big superhero movie, a coming-of-age film. I mean, this is a coming-of-age film, too, but I think very different than something like Hunt for the Wilder People.
So I think this movie defines a lot of what we've talked about with the last three films, too, was his way of injecting, courage into his characters, right? And real-life situations and relatable stuff by still being silly.
Yes.
And, we're going to have a 101 next week where we talk about the kind of importance of silliness.
Yes.
And we'll get into Waititi, I'm sure, a little bit in that festival, but this kind of is his crowning jewel to me so far. And there's not a moment I don't like or laugh at or think is bad. There's nothing about it that's bad. And, this is in frame of what if you're hearing a pitch of this, we kind of get this Anne Frank style story, right? With, a family hiding a Jewish girl in their attic. And this kid just so happens to be part of Hitler's youth army.
Yes, he's part of the youth army.
And it's in the innocent confidence of Hitler's youth army is amazing.
Yeah, definitely. There's this sense of them just we're at summer camp, right? I mean, these are total summer camp montages early on in the film. And it's interesting to think about. I know that he had this screenplay that he really had finished and was pitching after he did the movie Boy. So this is obviously
something he's thought about a while.
Yeah, well, and it's before A Hunt for the Wilder People. It's even before What We Do in the Shadows. Yep. And so you just think about if this guy that has this weird name that nobody knows, who's and I'm gonna play Hitler in it. I can see why at the time people are you seem like a really nice fellow, and we like your ideas, but we're not ready for this.
But he had enough cred to do it at this point, right?
Yeah, he'd finally done enough.
Darker-skinned Hitler as well.
I mean, definitely. I mean, the fact that we have a Maori Hitler is funny on its own merit, for sure. Although he does do a fantastic job, even down to who would have ever thought, looking at Taika Waititi, that you could put a hard part on him and give him the little mustache, and you're like, actually, it's pretty good. Yeah, better than a lot of fake Hitlers out there.
I think this hits on a little bit what you talked about last week about one of his underrated superpowers is his acting, and I think that shines here. Honestly, his parts with Jojo are probably the best parts of the movie. But I've watched this movie about 5 or 6 times now. I think it's one of the best movies in the last 5-10 years. What were your feelings about it?
I agree. It's one of the best films I've seen in quite some time.
So cleverly written too. Like, we're going to be quoting stuff throughout because there's so many good lines.
Well,
here.
we talked about his tightrope act between real tragedy and real trauma, and then this not whimsical to the level of a Wes Anderson, where every time a person dies or gets mutilated in some of the later Wes Anderson films, you're always like, whoa, what? Because you just don't see any of it coming, right? When you watch the Grand Budapest Hotel, like, when you see characters do awful things in that film, you're like, it kind of takes you out of it, because you're like, no, this is all a cartoon. Like, how did that character actually die? And that's not as true with Waititi. But that tightrope of something like Hunt for the Wilder People, where, his foster mom dies, and it's wedged between really funny images of him talking about Tupac being his best friend, and then Taika Waititi showing up as the weird priest, right?
Yeah.
It's wedged in the middle there somehow, where you're still like, ooh. Now he is doing that tightrope walk in really dangerous territory here, where you're talking about, like, World War II, and you're talking about the Nazis, and you're talking about Jews hiding, having to be hid, as you said, Anne Frank style. If you haven't read A Diary of Anne Frank, it's not a comic romp. No. It's a horrific tale of this poor girl and her family hiding in an attic. And here, somehow, because we're looking at this through the lens of this 10-year-old boy, with his imaginary friend of Adolf Hitler, and Jews having horns and tails and all these things, like, it does somehow...
They could look like us.
They could look like us.
They're scary.
Somehow it works. And there are some elements of how this is working I still can't totally put my finger on. Because it could have been so bad. I mean, listen, comedies during World War II, I mean, you've got Life is Beautiful, which I think upon rewatch years later, I'm like, no, it's gross. It probably shouldn't have gotten an Academy Award. It's kind of just because what's his name?
Roberto Benigni.
Like, he's kind of a douche. He's not somebody that you love, and so I think in rewatch that doesn't work. And then of course there's the classic one of Jerry Lewis, telethon Jerry Lewis. Jerry Lewis did The Day the Clown Cried.
That's right.
Which is like his prison vault movie. Like, it's once he's dead, it's like something like 20 years after he's dead, like, they'll actually screen the movie because it was so horribly panned, because he's like doing tricks for him while they're in the gas chamber, and then like everybody was like, Jerry, this is a terrible idea. And so he hid the movie, and it's never been seen since. But you go, normally these kinds of movies, it's a landmine of an area.
That's what I'm saying, and he dodges, I think, all of them.
How? I mean, I agree.
I think
but some of it, I'm like, I don't understand.
I think it comes down to, you don't have to paint the heavy weight of racism all over this movie, right? It's already there. They're already dressed like Nazis, right?
That's all you have to do.
So it's like this casual, subtle, like we know how we feel. Like, at one point, Jojo says, he says, yeah, well, I'm all about swastikas, so of course I'm a Nazi.
Yeah. Which is like,
to Elsa.
And I have to say...
But like, just the way they play it, and just how he plays Hitler, right?
Yeah, that's a huge part of it.
And just like it's almost like it's almost like a sympathetic Hitler to a degree, right? Because he's like, you're the best. Yeah, you're the bestest, most. What does he say? Get out there and do your best. You're the most loyal little Nazi I ever met. Mm-hmm. And like, it's just funny. And
you have the body of a snake. You have the head of a wolf, right? You have the heart of a lion.
You're like, scrawny. You're unpopular.
Yeah.
Just listed all these things, and I love that he keeps trying to get him to smoke.
10 years old, stop offering me cigarettes. Well, and I think that in asking that question of how does this work, there's something really interesting happening here that did remind me of Wes Anderson, although I feel like Taika Waititi is subversive in ways that Wes Anderson couldn't be in his wildest
Totally.
dreams.
Just them arguing about how to say Heil Hitler at the beginning.
All of those elements are
writing
huge.
that, like you said, how are you pitching this movie? Because this is like, how did you get this done? You had to be. He had to be to where he was.
Producers had to fall in love with the man himself in order to sign on for this. But what I was going to say is that this element did remind me of Wes Anderson, but is subvertive in a way that's unlike anything else, which is putting the "I Want to Hold Your Hand" Beatles song sung in German to images of teenage girls going crazy for Hitler. And I was like, oh, what an interesting twist. Like the teen bop sensation, but it's attached to Nazis, and it's attached to the pageantry of Nazis. I was like, oh, right out of the gates, like, what an interesting take on how young German kids could get swept up in this thing without ever stopping to think about that this is fascism or this is something dangerous. What better way to do it than being like, it's Beatlemania,
sure,
but it's Hitler. It's this like 50-year-old like schlubby dude who screams and sweats a lot, but for some reason kids are like, oh my god, it's Hitler.
He does it a few other times in the movie with different songs. He as
obviously
they're watching
the ending one
with the David Bowie Heroes, of course, but also with Everybody's Gotta Live by Love.
Yes.
As the bombs are falling in the background and the war is ending. It's just like he definitely has that. It's
pretty brilliant.
That touch with the music, a la Wes Anderson as well. Like,
right, totally. Which is why I thought of it as
sure,
like because of all the was it Life Aquatic?
Yeah.
Where there's all like the Portuguese versions of Bowie songs.
Oh yeah,
which is fantastic.
Yeah.
But again, like that's not subverting
he
something
can hit his
to
music cues, I guess, is my point, right?
Definitely, but there's a subtext in that first opening song with the Beatlemania thing that I had heard people talk about something similar where it's like a lot of people in Germany, at least early on, like I think probably before the Night of Broken Glass, before something like that, before everybody was like, oh shit, like they're all in jackboots. But prior to that, I can be like, oh, it was a fad.
This is also like something I can watch with my kids and like have a laugh riot. Like,
yeah, there's some dark moments.
It's my wife's favorite movie. She loves
really.
Yeah, she absolutely loves this movie. I don't know how you can't love this movie. Honestly, it's hard for me to imagine other than like walking that line if it becomes too far at some point. Which he's so restrained. Like there's so many places he could go, and I love that you can't figure out why this works so much. Because it's obviously. You've been thinking about it, right?
I've been thinking about it a lot. And obviously one part that's very apparent once you finish the movie is the characters who are unredeemable, we don't really care about. And I would even include like a character who is redeemable, and we get his redemption at the end, would be Sam Rockwell's. Captain K. We get, but if you think about it, you go, his mom, obviously his dad, his sister, his friend, Yorkie. Oh my god!
It's basically Ricky Baker, like 5 years before.
Oh
Hunt
my
for the Wilder
god!
People, right?
It is the cutest with his little round glasses and just amazing. But all those characters, and so then characters that are irredeemable. So like Stephen Merchant's character. What's the actress's name? That's the bigger woman.
Rebel Wilson.
Who normally I don't like. I see her and stuff, and I'm like, she's fine. I know. She's so funny here. She's
fine. I
think she's fantastic.
Her first movie was Pitch Perfect, Fat Amy. I don't know if you've ever seen that movie. I don't think you have. But
wouldn't it be weird if I was like, oh, I've seen it so many times? Like you'd be like, that's weird.
But she's really funny in that, and that's kind of where she got her start. And I've realized since that, like, oh, you're basically like a female Danny McBride. Like
you got one speed.
Yeah, you got your one thing, and you just do it the same thing over and over and over. And it's funny the first time you see it, but then in like maybe the 18th time, it's not as funny.
I don't know, man. I still can't quit Danny McBride. I think he could just keep popping up as that character, and it'll take me a while to get sick of it.
They're both good at what they do.
Yeah, but I think
it's just a German version of her.
But right, and she's also an irredeemable character. Like she does not have. She is you know, and you think Captain K is going to be, and then there's a fun twist later on with him. But really, most of the characters that the movie makes you like, because it's interesting that Stephen Merchant's character does get off a couple of good crackers, but really he's just a tall, lanky version of the creepy dude from Raiders of the Lost Ark gets his face melted off.
Completely.
Like he's just a tall kind of funny version of that character, right? We have ways of making you talk, like that kind of a German where you're like, oh, I hate this guy.
Oh, so good.
Who would ever have thought that someone would make you hate Stephen Merchant?
It's also hilarious because it's Stephen Merchant. And just like the situation they put him in, the fact that they say Heil Hitler to every single person, like hello. It's just like it's old after a minute. But I love, I honestly hope of anyone out of this movie, I hope that Sam Rockwell becomes like Waititi's muse, because they are perfect together.
They're perfect together.
From frame one, and he's eating that apple, you're just like, God damn it.
He has the one bad
He's like,
eye.
hi, guys.
Yeah.
Hey, let me hear it, guys.
Let me hear it, guys.
But he's so good in this movie, and like, he's drunk the whole time, but he's still redeemable. And then let's talk more about the cast. Obviously, Scarlett Johansson plays Rosie, JoJo's mom here. She's amazing.
So good here.
She is. She's very blunt and harsh, but she's also really charming.
And also with just the teeniest bit of, I don't want to say full-blown mental illness, but there's something going on with her. She's a little weird, and it makes you realize that why JoJo is the way that he is.
For sure.
Like that she's like,
she tries to identify with him a lot,
and she's always make-believing, but she's very bombastic, and you especially think like at a period of time where she is a secret ally against the Germans, that what she's doing is an attempt to make it seem like, oh, that's the furthest thing from me. But she's so bombastic with everybody and sings and dances and is like so full of life and so vibrant. Yeah. But at the same time, you're also like, you're also a little weird. Like there's a little something going on.
I'm
with
sure
you.
She's gone through some shit, and like she tells Elsa, I'm sure you've lived more lifetimes than a lot of people.
Totally. But it's part of what makes you love her, and I've never seen her play a character quite like that. I think that I've seen like her be charming and maybe aloof, or I've seen her be a superhero, but I've never seen her be something like this where she's being comedic and funny and broad. And
they're
she's
wearing
great
matching jammies too.
They have matching jammies. I'm just thinking of the moment where she's like, "Oh, you wish your father was here?"
Oh yeah,
and slaps
obviously.
The ash
I was
going to
get to that part, but where she puts on the beard, that's the scene.
And then plays both roles, and like I was just like, how have I not seen this side of Scarlett Johansson?
Like it's
so
brilliant
good.
Scene,
yeah.
And she plays it so well there, and it's like this harsh, quick like turn where you're like, oh shit, I didn't know she was going there.
Yeah,
and she throws that ash and all over her face, like such a cool scene, so intense, and really gets the point across.
Yeah,
to she puts JoJo in a real life situation. Right. Like, oh, you want him here? Let me show you your dad.
Well, and something I didn't really think about until the movie was over, and I've been chewing on the last day or two, is what it must be like for her character, who is a secret ally. Her husband, JoJo's father, is also a secret ally. They're hiding a German or a Jewish teenager in the catacombs of their house, like all this stuff, and that in order to protect her son, she's kept her son from all of this and kind of kept up this nationalistic vibe, not over the top, but just being like, yeah, let's get along kind of a thing, and that then her son creates an imaginary friend who's Hitler. Like, that's how deep he's into it, and she can't do shit about it because she knows that trying to sway him away from any of that
we'll get him killed. Yeah.
Well, like and you think about it, that time period, it's a fun obstacle for the movie itself, but when you realize that the real obstacle of this movie is that the German party is rewarding followers if they snitch on their own friends and family, right? Like that's you're rewarded for that level of loyalty, and that's the fun coming of age obstacle that this movie has for our main character. You're like, what a nice way to like cover with frosting a fucking horrifying moment of
no doubt.
Yeah,
that's his superpower.
It is his superpower.
We keep talking about it, but he somehow,
it's deeply complex to then turn into like, what's he gonna do, right? Like,
it's true. Like, it's hard to predict what his future as a director would look like.
Well,
right?
And the movie manages to avoid how terrible a cost that actually is by things like him handing out pamphlets in a cardboard robot suit.
No, he's
right?
getting medal for Hitler.
Oh, that's right. He's getting medal for Hitler. He sees his mom putting out the flyers.
Yeah.
But the movie like kind of like sidelines us with those kinds of elements before we truly see what the price is that's paid. And I'm jumping around a little bit, but let's talk more about sort of what happens to him, how he gets his nickname, some of these different elements. I love that we get this early scene with these older teenage Nazis who are bullying him.
Yeah.
And, you know...
he's like, of course, I love killing.
I love killing. I kill all the time. Yeah, exactly.
But he's 10 years old, right?
Of course, yeah.
He's 10.
And that's...
and that's maybe another reason why, right? Is that this is a little... Because there is the innocence there. They don't know what they're obviously being played here. And it's that innocent... you don't think about how old someone is when they believe something, right?
Okay, well, let's do this really quick. When do you think, and if anybody's watching this with kids in the room for any reason, get them out now. But not because I'm going to say something dirty, but how old were you when you stopped believing in Santa? Do you think?
Oh,
like when you found out, like, oh, it's my parents and all that.
Yeah, probably 11, 12. Maybe,
yeah, probably 10, 11.
Age. Yeah,
yeah.
His age. Yeah.
So, like, that's the thing is, like, if you go, okay, you still, and maybe you were even on the fence by 10, right? You're like, it might be my parents, I don't know. But, like, you go, okay, the idea that Hitler could be, like, the nicest guy on the planet, and that there are people out there who can read each other's minds, have horns that they hide with their hair, and stuff their tail down their pants.
Yep.
If you could believe that reindeer can fly and that elves make G.I. Joes, then like it's quite possible that at that
100%.
age, you're like, this could be real, right?
Yeah,
and so I think that's that same time period.
That's part of how he's getting away with it, though, right?
Right.
It's pretty interesting. You know, we do have this whole army training scene, which is really funny. It's like summer camp stuff. And yeah, they ask him to kill this rabbit, and he won't do it. And he gets called Jojo Rabbit because he won't do it, and he runs away. And then Hitler... Waititi in the forest, he does this little pop-in.
What's wrong, little man?
Yeah, like if you're gonna go for it, then go for it, right?
Why the frown?
But like, just his head popping around the tree is the funniest thing to me.
It's like he's puffed the magic dragon with a Hitler mustache.
Totally. But he tells Jojo to be the rabbit, right?
Yeah.
And become that rabbit. And that's when he goes and tries to prove himself and takes a bomb and throws it, and it comes back and blows up in his face.
Did not expect that to happen.
Sure.
It blew my mind. Now, this is based on a book, right?
That's right. Yeah.
This is based on a book that is not...
By Christine Lunez.
Which I believe the book is called...
Caging Skies.
Caging Skies. And it's not a comedy at all by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah. I hadn't thought of that.
I don't think that it's funny. From the things I've read about the book, like there's a couple of...
How does she feel about this movie then?
I have no idea. I mean, probably however the woman that wrote The Orchid Thief feels about adaptation. Probably. I mean... But, it's similar in the sense of, like, you wrote a book that's about this one thing. Now, I from what I know, the beat by beat of everything is taken very seriously. And I don't know enough, and we'll put up here, I am not sure if Caging Skies has an imaginary friend that's Hitler. I'm not sure about that element of it. But either way, I know that it was not considered to be, like, a funny book.
Sure.
So Waititi, obviously, he got the options for it. So
it's kind of amazing that he was able to do that. The fact that it wasn't, like...
I wonder if
it's all about how he frames and shoots and creates his characters, right?
Well, and the voice for his characters and how authentic he makes them. Because, again, like what we were just talking about with Santa, it's like, I wonder if he read it and pictured himself as a 10-year-old being like, how would I react?
Sure.
And then bubbled up from there of, like, of course he's going to have, like... rock songs in his head. He's a 10-year-old, right? And he's going to be like, I'm going to be the rabbit. And like all of these elements he like landed on as being like, oh, here's how a 10-year-old would see it. Because my God, his version of the 12-year-old Ricky Baker like is so spot on of a kid. Dude,
totally.
Just again, I know I keep saying it, but
he's like, I'm just a kid in a fat kid's body.
Yeah. Oh my God. Well, or even just like, again, from Wilder people, like Tupac, he's a famous rapper. He's pretty much my best friend.
Yeah.
Like, I think about that line every couple of days because I'm like, it is only if you truly remember what it was like to be that age could you write that line of dialogue.
It's his ability to get into that childlike state of mind, right? Like, and whether it's racism or if it's Tupac, whatever it is.
Well, and this idea of like that you think you're cool. I remember being 10 years old, like riding my BMX bike around my neighborhood, being like,
"I'm the
other kids are seeing me and they know I'm pretty cool," and that's like so heartwarming and so endearing.
Well, I think some of the brilliance of Taika here is the little things that he does that probably weren't in the book. You think of stuff like the knife ricocheting and going into the kid's leg. You could spend a whole scene on that, right? Or when they do the hand over the poster and Hitler's face changes. I don't know if you noticed that.
Oh, I did.
That one's
definitely
amazing.
did.
Where they show like butterflies in his stomach, like just those little things. But then you get the like seeing the bodies in the town square being hung, right? And Rosie is like, look. Look at what we could be.
And he says, what did they do? And she says, whatever they could.
Yep. Like beautifully written movie.
Beautifully written. And there's
and book probably.
There's a later moment, the last battle scene where he runs into Yorkie again, and Yorkie's wearing a cardboard suit. And the Captain K is there, and he's in the suit that he drew with crayons, with his Gatling gun and his weird feathers, and it's all in slow motion. And there's that beautiful song playing, but then they've also like dressed him up again in this outfit. And there's real death and there's real destruction, but at the same time, it's this loopy, loosey-goosey visuals that are taking place.
But didn't like
I was reminded so starkly, not of the movie adaptation of this, but of the book Slaughterhouse-Five.
Oh yeah,
that I was like, there's no way. Again, the cardboard suit. That is so dead on something that would have been in Slaughterhouse-Five. I know it's not, but he does. Billy Pilgrim does end up having to wear a woman's coat with like missized boots and like a weird frilly cap. Like, it's so spot on of the absurdity of something that Vonnegut would write that I was just spellbound in that last act. And that saying that everything before it, if the movie had stayed with the tone it had for the first hour and change, I would have been completely happy. The fact that it went to this surreal level, that we've only really seen portrayed in movies in the 1960s and 70s. I think that something happened after Full Metal Jacket where a spell was broken, and it was like, if you're going to talk about war, it has to be as realistic as humanly possible.
Sure.
Right? And so you get Saving Private Ryan. You get these like versions of war where you leave and you're shell-shocked and you're like, what the fuck, right? And that what this feels like is, I hope that this movie, this depiction of World War II as, again, something on a Vonnegut level of surrealism means that we have a new era of movies about war that can be portrayed that are surreal again. Yeah. Because it's high time for it. Because back in the day, we would see it all the time, right? Yep. Whether that was Slaughterhouse-Five or Johnny Get Your Gun or Johnny Got His Gun or some of these Catch-22, right? Where it's like war is ridiculous.
It's absurd.
It's absurd and surreal.
Yeah, as absurd as the sense of humor throughout this whole thing.
Yeah, yeah. And the tension can be real and the trauma can bleed through, even though what we're seeing is absurd. Because when we finally see Captain K with his weird feather headpiece on, we're in the midst of so much trauma that it isn't funny anymore. It's heartbreaking in some weird way. When we see him earlier with it as like a cartoon, we're like, oh my God, this is so weird. You're such an idiot. When we see him later actually in the outfit, our heart is wrenched. Yep. It's beautiful. I don't know how that works.
I really don't. It's, I think we'll get into this a little more when we talk about the importance of silliness, but comedy and tragedy are peanut butter and jelly, right?
They completely are.
Mixture.
Yeah.
And if you approach it right, and if you take the right humanity to it, then you can watch or laugh at anything.
Right.
Right.
It's something that's silly in 1 second in the next second can be symbolic, right?
Sure.
You can go from silly to symbolic in this way because once we see Captain K in his weird Sergeant Pepper's outfit,
well, and he's just all the characters are funny,
right?
And so it's hard to like you come to love Captain K, right? And like,
but you see him talk about the outfit, and you're like, oh yeah, this is how absurd war looks to a child.
Yeah.
But then later when he's in it in slow motion shooting his Gatling gun,
slow-mo is awesome.
But at the same time, it's hilarious, and you're like, oh my god, he's in the outfit.
He's finally where he wants to be. Yeah.
But then at the exact same time, you're like, this is his big moment, and he's just shooting bullets into a cloud. Right? It still holds zero worth and merit.
There's no stakes, really.
There's no stakes. And when we turn back around and we see JoJo's face, he's just horrified. He's like, you're not the hero of the day. This is just more bullshit.
Let's get into the relationship of Elsa and JoJo. That's kind of like the heart of this movie, probably, is where he, it's not someone with horns. It's not someone who it is someone who looks like him, right? But it's also like someone he can relate to and someone he's kind of in love with. It's a girl who is a pretty quick replacement for his sister as well, whether he knows it or not at that time. Even if
it's
he does,
obviously the reason why his mom took her in.
Oh, totally. And even if he has a little crush, like, you can see how she steps into that role, and she sets him straight on a lot of stuff. And he's writing Yoo-Hoo Jew, his expose on the Nazis, and he and so he wants to learn all the things about him, and she's telling him all this bullshit like bread and cheese and meat are the worst. They get rid of us and all this stuff. And
so he's leaving it to her, and there's more cheese for you.
Just those little jokes and stuff, but like, he's like, here, if I'm gonna let you live here, I want you to draw where you live. Yep. And she starts drawing, and he's like, this is just a stupid picture of my head. He's like, yeah, that's where we live.
That's where we live, in your head.
So brilliant. Again, beautifully written.
Yes.
And cleverly written. But like, just their relationship and what they kind of get into, and how he leans on her and doesn't let them know, right? Like, he still keeps it secret. Rosie doesn't know at all that they know
each other.
Yeah, they never.
She never figures
that out.
I love that she has a fiance, Nathan.
Yes, and he finds these letters.
Yeah, and he starts finding these letters. But then also there's all these when the Stephen Merchant shows up and they find Yoo-Hoo Jew. There's all these drawings in here of this boy named Nathan who's being horribly tortured. So he's I'm putting Nathan in a cage. And all of this because they broke up, right? Or whatever. Like that's
like, he's a threat to him.
Yeah. And so like, oh, I'm gonna hear I have Nathan on a spit and he's over a fire.
His first few letters are very like written by a 10-year-old, right?
Oh yeah, totally. Well, and then that last letter that is just an empty piece of paper that he's reading from, like, all of that stuff is absolutely brilliant. And yeah, you're right. Their relationship, the second that you find out, oh, she's in the house with them, you're like, well, I know where this is going to go. That's what's interesting, is that I would say probably 85% of this plot, there are no surprises. There's nothing about the way this story is written other than one particular element that's in any way surprising to us.
Well, and we start...
And that's okay. That's totally fine.
Totally. That's what all great directors are brilliant at. Think of the Coen brothers. They take something that and tweak it in their own way and make it their own. Yep. And now you're like, oh shit, I see what they're doing.
They're like, don't worry about the story.
He does the same thing.
We're going to just follow the story map.
Yeah.
You don't have to worry about there being a Shyamalan twist in here. It's just going to go, oh, that's the arc I thought was going to happen, but the journey is going to be so enjoyable. Now, that's with one really big exception.
Sure. Well, before we get to that, he kind of, at this point, he's keeping her in his attic, and we are seeing Hitler less and less, right? Yep. And our last time we see him, he's in his bed.
Well, before that, can I say the one...
I don't want to make this awkward. I don't want to make any of this awkward.
Yeah, but the one before that, when he shows up in the Native American war hat, the actual headdress, and he's like, "So what's going on with the Jewel girl upstairs?" Like that to me, I was like, Where did the Indian headdress?
What are you hiding?
Yeah. All of those just.
But then, of course, so we're getting to the moment that you're talking about, and honestly, a few moments before that, where it's their last scene on screen together, where she's walking
and dancing,
and dancing along this kind of just next to this it's on a wall basically, right? And he's walking and they're dancing and having a good time, and then he follows this blue butterfly.
She's been gone for a couple of days. Which happens.
Merchant is coming this time, right? And like Sam Rockwell, Captain K shows up, and they both know what's going on.
Yep.
Like, he plays dumb, and then Elsa,
and that's when you actually
plays
his sister,
the sister, and
and that's when you actually find out that Captain K is on their side, because she says, "Oh, I was born on the 1st, but it was the 7th, and he didn't say anything." And you go, "Okay, maybe not a full-blown capital A ally, but something's going on with him, right?" And he doesn't want to talk about it, but there's something going on with him. Then he follows this blue butterfly. I have to say, did not see this coming.
Shocking reveal.
Did not see this coming. And I,
cried?
Sitting here with the headphones on and watching it, and made an auditory like, "Oh my God," like said it out loud. And I totally cried. And it is, he sees, and we...
Her shoes. It's the shoes, right?
It's her shoes. And she has been hung. And we never see her face. I think that is such a good choice. Yeah. We do not need to go too far down that road. But I will say this, the confidence that he has in his young actor what's that actor's name?
Jojo?
Yeah.
It is Roman Griffin Davis.
He is, obviously he's a brilliant actor anyway.
So good here.
But being aloof and funny is one thing. Being able to show like earth-shattering like horror and sadness is a totally other thing. And he nails it here, especially when he's going to try and tie her shoelace, and oh my God,
shoelace,
dude.
Yeah. Oh. And then it comes back around at the end with the shoelace as well with Elsa.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, shocking for sure the first time you see it, and heartbreaking. And it's pretty much the only person he has left, right? He's on his own, and he's only 10 years old.
Yep.
Now, obviously, there's a youth army that he could follow, I guess, if he wanted to, and go with Yorkie. But like the war's ending, so what's he gonna do next? But I agree, the way that he's able to shift to sad and then funny, it's a hard balance. Like those are probably my favorite types of movies. Can you be dramatic and can you be funny at the same time? And be absurd funny or ridiculous funny, but still make me have feelings for these people. And he does that in all of his movies.
Well,
right?
Let me take it one further for you there, which is, whenever would a director or writer, for that matter, cut out a sequence of high drama and action from a movie?
True.
Right? You are going to lean into high drama and action if you are not 1000% confident in yourself that it's the right move. You're like, well, how many times can we watch this boy and this girl that's hiding in the wall have like a kind of goofy adolescent / pre-adolescent conversation where they're dancing around these issues, right? And you're like, well, X amount of times. And you're like, no, over here we got mom who's been kidnapped by the Gestapo. Sure. She gets interrogated, and eventually, dude, they fucking kill her. They hang her. And he's like, cut all of it. We don't see any of it. We know all that happens because she's hanging in the town square.
There you go. That's another way he's getting away with it.
And all we do is see her shoes.
Yep.
And his reaction, because
that's
it's his story.
That's all you need to see. Yeah, it's through his eyes.
But still, the confidence you have to have in yourself in order to do that, I'm like, God, man, what a vision to say, cut all that. We don't need to see any of that when it's a movie that's about, yes, it's bombastic and it has the funny thing where he throws the explosive and it goes back at him, and we get a huge battle at the end of the movie.
That's why
and there's
all the
these
best
moments,
parts in Thor Ragnarok are when you're not in the Marvel world.
Yeah,
right?
you cut away from the big fight scene to watch like some character talking to another character. Yeah, because that's all he cares about. You're absolutely right, but it is still like, I was like, dude, you didn't even blow your load. You were like, I don't need that. Like, I don't know. Yeah, here's a huge dramatic arc in the movie. I will throw it away.
I truly think that he will be looked upon as a very important director in the future.
I hope so.
In 20 years from now, we're going to look back at his career and go, wow. Like,
that's so good.
Not only are you innovative with your sense of humor and just the overall, I don't know. I think he's changing what comedy films can be.
Well, and he's hitting his stride, and he's like our age, which is amazing to think about. That you're like, okay, you have so many decades of movies ahead of you because like you're just figuring out. Like people are like, oh, that feels like a Taika Waititi moment.
Sure.
And you're like, yes.
Now when people start referencing your name,
you're doing a thing that's very different. I agree. You were right. You were correct.
Is it his best movie? That's my last question.
I think it is. I think it is his best movie. The ending, and I'll just say this about the ending, you know, they come dancing out and they start dancing. If you've ever watched any behind the scenes stuff with Taika Waititi, it makes perfect sense that that's how they ended the movie, because I watched a whole behind the scenes thing with Thor Ragnarok, and everybody was like, until you're ready for your take, he has music playing from his phone all the time, and he's always dancing. And they show all this footage of him just like he's dancing around and they're all dancing too, and there's like he just has like mini dance parties, and he's like, okay, you ready? Okay. And they'll like turn off the music and then they'll do the scene, and I'm like, they probably were like, okay, they look at each other and then he's like, start dancing, like just, you know, like we've been doing the whole time we've been making this movie.
I'm sure it was written.
It was something of just like, you know what I mean? I wouldn't, but I would not be surprised at all if there wasn't some level of spontaneity of like, okay, here's a move that David Bowie used to do. Try this. And he gets it dead on of like the, you know, it's so, but I mean, it made me cry again. Like I cried again at that of them dancing, because I was like, oh, the movie doesn't need to end with like, here's what they went on and did after this. It's literally just that they can have the childlike joy of dancing and looking at each other and being goofballs to each other.
That's what he's good at, is a childlike joy.
Yeah.
I don't know. We've said he's good at a lot of things throughout this festival, and he has lots of superpowers, and I totally still believe that.
Yep.
I actually have been confirmed even more about that after watching all these films together and talking about them and critiquing them. It really has made me appreciate him as a director on a whole new level, even though he was already one of my favorites. Yeah. So, but this movie is the capper.
Yeah, if you're like, yeah, you can go watch Roman Polanski, and he's really good at making you feel like you need to take a shower, right? Or you can go watch Cronenberg.
And there's a world for those types of movies.
Oh yeah, and you're like, and every time they do it, so like even if you watch, you're like, I love David Cronenberg's body horror, and then you watch Eastern Promises, and you're like, it's probably not going to pop up in this, and you're like, oh fuck, it still did. It's like the same thing where you're like, well, this is a movie about Nazi Germany, so what are the odds I'm going to feel as good about life as I would watching something like Hunt for the Wilder People? And then you're like, there it is.
It's surprising.
There it is again.
Surprisingly hopeful, right?
It's surprisingly hopeful, which is great.
Well,
we've gushed a bunch.
We love you, YTT.
Yes, very much.
Well, thanks very much for listening. Please like and subscribe if you're into what we're doing. We got all sorts of scene analysis. We have 101s. We have
punishment reviews.
Forgotten Gems, punishment review. Oh, we got a good punishment review coming up that I can't wait to get into.
Me too.
But please like and subscribe, support the channel. We really appreciate it. And next week we'll probably throw a scene adaptation or a scene essay in there. But I think we're going to do the 101 and the importance of silliness to maybe extend this Waititi conversation into a bigger topic about the importance of silliness in comedy.
Yeah, just like how, again, making people laugh can allow you to do a lot of other things in the background while you're doing it.
Yep. We'll get into that next week. Thanks for listening. We'll see you soon.
Bye, you guys.